Good to go? Is missing somebody? Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, our listening and viewing audience live on social media. Welcome to the weekly press conference of the Leader of the Opposition. And with me this morning is Senator Dhanpaul, and joining us very soon will be Senator Faris Al-Rawi. This morning, the Leader of the Opposition, I just want to inform you that she has started her own tradition of meeting members of the public at Balize House on scheduled days. And this morning, she is scheduled to meet with members of the public at Balize House. And in response to that, she has asked me to kindly represent her this morning at this morning's news conference to chair this morning's proceedings. So we wish her good luck meeting members of the public. My understanding is that on the last occasion where she met members of the public, it has been quite a very successful exercise. And this morning she has over 30 or 40 persons who have asked to meet with her. All right, so we wish her all the best in this exercise. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning in Trinidad and Tobago, we have so many issues to discuss that is occupying our minds at the national level. And if we were to engage all of the issues, it would perhaps take the entire day, and perhaps even more. So what we have decided to do is to identify those pressing issues that we believe are occupying the minds of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's the reason why Senator Dhanpaul is here to talk about the budget and the planned date for the budget, which is October the 13th, and all of the issues surrounding the announcement of that date of the budget. Senator Faris Al-Rawi will speak on the incident that occurred yesterday where a sitting minister of government is facing new charges before the criminal court and all of the issues associated with that. So over the last 48 hours, it has indeed been a traumatic one for Trinidad and Tobago. I would dare say it was like a UNC tornado that passed through Trinidad and Tobago and is giving the citizens of this country whiplash. And we just need to settle down. And if this is 6 months of UNC leadership, then it shows then that we have more tornadoes to come from a political perspective, because it is like Calamity Jane is leading the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and it will be calamity after calamity, tornadoes after tornadoes, instability after instability, because as Dr. Eric Williams once said, the alternative to the PNM is chaos and confusion. I want to start this morning by reminding you that when this government came into power, they have exercised their prerogative to make changes on state boards throughout the entire public sector. We have raised some issue with respect to the qualification of members of state boards, especially some of those state boards that can impact the quality of life of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We have raised those issues time and time again because the state sector, if it is not managed well, it can have serious implications for governance in Trinidad and Tobago. So the persons and the citizens that we appoint to state boards is something that we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, must pay close attention. But under the state boards, you have executive leadership of these state institutions. And we have never seen in the history of this country post our independence the attack on the professional class and the professional sector in this country by any government. Boards are appointed mainly through the sitting government, and you don't have an interview process for the appointment of those boards by and large, so they are basically political appointees. But those persons who sit at the executive leadership of the organization, these organizations are professionals in themselves who have decided to come forward and offer their skills and their expertise in the state sector. For example, the Water and Sewage Authority. The last PNM government took pains to go out with a very transparent process to recruit the best minds locally and regionally to manage the Water and Sewerage Authority, contrary to what would have occurred on previous occasions by previous political parties, where those persons who were appointed, they simply needed to have a party card or somehow aligned to the political party in power. And we have decided as a government, when the PNM was in government, that we needed to depoliticize the operations and the management of WASA and to recruit a group of persons who, based on their competencies, based on their qualifications, and based on their skills, wherever they are, regardless of whether they are politically aligned or not, that we will get the best managers to manage the authority, because part of the problem that we have identified in the Water and Sewerage Authority, for example, just using that as an example, is management. You can invest how much you want in infrastructure upgrades, in the drilling of wells, in the installation of new water treatment plants and what have you, but you need competent managers to manage this infrastructure so that the people of Trinidad and Tobago can get a reliable supply of water. It took almost 2 to 3 years for the last PNM government to go through a very transparent process to get an executive management in place to manage the authority, where a CEO came from Barbados, and in under 1 month, the UNC government came into power and unceremoniously removed the executive leadership of that organization. Persons who would have made personal sacrifices, leaving their families behind, to come and offer themselves in public service as professionals, as being part of this professional class, had to be hounded out of office. And it bothers me deeply. It bothers me deeply because all of the so-called analysts who like to make themselves present and harassing the national psyche on a regular basis and writing columns to the newspapers, I am yet to hear or read a column in the national newspapers of Trinidad and Tobago where issue is being taken by this government for attacking the professional class, persons who have been duly appointed because of their skills, because of their competencies, because of their qualification, nothing to do with politics, and they are being hounded out of office. A country with 1.3 or 1.4 million people needs to protect its best minds, so that regardless of whatever the change might take place at the political level, there is continuity in governance, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago will not, their lives and their livelihood and the quality of life will not be impacted. But when a government can take aim, a political party, many of whom purchase their degrees or get it from paper mills, attacking the working class and attacking the professional class, it is a very dangerous precedent to set. It has happened in WASA. It has happened in the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. It has happened in FCB. It has happened in Heritage. It has happened recently in CAL. It has happened in TSTT, where professionals who applied for jobs work hard, make their sacrifices, and the government is not only removing political appointees, but they are attacking the professional class in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm saying here today at this press conference that this will lead to instability in this country. Why should people who make personal sacrifices, our best minds, our best citizens, cutting across race and social class, who made sacrifices to educate themselves and offer themselves in public service in this country on a competitive basis, they are now being attacked and replaced by persons who did not go through a recruitment process and to occupy these positions. What is going to happen with some of our state enterprises that require our best minds, our competent minds, our qualified minds. It is one thing, ladies and gentlemen, it is one thing to change your board and put incompetent party hacks, but it is a different matter when you have members of the executive management of state enterprises being attacked in this way. We have never seen it in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. I can give you an example. Anthony Isidore Smart, chairman of FCB, appointed under a UNC government between 2010 and 2015. The PNM government came into power in 2015, and Anthony Smart remained the chairman of FCB up until a couple weeks ago, where he was removed as chairman of FCB. I'll give you another example. Kelvin Ramsuk, a professional within the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, appointed between the period 2010 and 2015 by the UNC government, who would have spent all his years as a competent, qualified engineer within the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. When the PNM came into government, he remained as general manager of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. And he remained as general manager and proceeded on his retirement up to the time when I served as Minister of Public Utilities in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. He served under the UNC, he served under the PNM. But today, you would have seen not too long ago, where again, the general manager of TNTech was removed from office. And I could also tell you that in many instances where some of these professionals are chased out of office, they are asked to sign non-disclosure contracts so that you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, will not understand the circumstances under which they were asked to exit their office. I am telling the people of Trinidad and Tobago today, it is one thing, and as bad as it is, to remove your best minds at the level of the boards in the state enterprises, but when you attack your professional class in the way that the professional class is being attacked today, it is going to impact the quality of governance in this country. It takes me to another point. A state of emergency was declared in this country not too long ago. And during this state of emergency, it's still in effect. We have heard that the prisons commissioner was sent on leave. During a state of emergency, it should concern every citizen that why during the state of emergency, the head of one of your key national security institutions was sent on leave. And whilst all of that was happening as though it was not bad, you are hearing of movements taking place at the executive level of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And contrary to what others may say, I am saying it is a very serious matter when you are hearing of these changes taking place within key institutions of national security, where the Minister of Homeland Security, in a passing out parade, made open statements that you have infighting taking place in the management of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. His statement was clear that there have been infighting taking place at the level on the leadership of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. He tried to retract the statement some days after, but it was quite clear. And shortly after, we hear of movements again taking place in the leadership of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service within a state of emergency. In August, we woke up to the news that the commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment was sent on 365 days vacation leave. 365 days vacation leave. And shortly after, that decision was rescinded. And he was asked to take up duties again to lead the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment. We must ask ourselves, what was the role of the Prime Minister as chair of the National Security Council on these matters. These serious and urgent matters of national security, where the head of your regiment in a state of emergency was immediately sent on leave, and 2 or 3 days after, that decision was cancelled and he was asked to take back up responsibility and leadership of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment. All of these matters, ladies and gentlemen, are taking place during a state of emergency, a state of public emergency in Trinidad and Tobago. And I can tell you, when that decision was taken, it caused instability within the ranks of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force. Instability. And when you have instability within the ranks of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force in a state of emergency, it must concern every single citizen. Last night at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., news came to hand that the Chief of Defence Staff was sent on leave immediately. The Chief of Defence Staff was sent on immediate leave. So you have attacks taking place at the professional class. You now have a level of instability taking place in the national security services of Trinidad and Tobago within a state of emergency. And the PNM opposition today is calling upon the Prime Minister as chair of the National Security Council to explain to the population what is taking place in national security in this country. What is taking place? And our understanding is that that decision that occurred last night, where the Chief of Defence Staff was sent on immediate leave by Her Excellency the President, is already contributing to instability within the ranks of the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force. These are matters that must be treated sensitively. These are delicate issues of national security. And when you have the changing of leadership at the level of the Chief of Defence Staff within your military, there are certain military protocols that normally accompanies that, where there's a proper handing over. A handing over parade is conducted. And then you have a smooth transition from one leadership to the other in true military style and military tradition. But today, under Calamity Jane and UNC Tornado, all of these things are now thrown out of the window, and it's instability left, right, and center in Trinidad and Tobago. Instability, lack of leadership, the destruction of proper protocols. These are matters that must concern not only us in the PNM, but if we are concerned about the stability of Trinidad and Tobago, these are matters that must be taken seriously. And today, we wake up again to new movements taking place at the Defence Force, where our CDS was sent on immediate leave without proper transition, without proper protocols, in the midst of a state of emergency. And whilst all of that is happening, members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, 9 murders over the last 24 hours. 9 murders over the last 24 hours. And I made this statement not too long ago, a week ago, in Point Fortin, that if the government does not present a holistic proposal to tackle crime at its root causes in Trinidad and Tobago, then everything else is just fluff. Not too long ago, you would have heard from key spokesperson in national security that you have a 40% reduction in murder, close to 50%. When the PNM left office in April 28th, there was already a reduction in murder by 31% because of the state of emergency. But we warned the population that these gains are not substantial. They are fleeting. You are in the midst of a state of emergency. But after that, if you do not buckle down to do the hard work, then all of that will be immediately reversed. 1 week ago, the Minister of Homeland Security boasting, key spokespersons of national security boasting that there is a reduction in murder, and over the last 24 hours, 9 murders. Very serious matter. 9 murders in a state of emergency. Prison commissioner removed. Instability within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with movements of leaders and executive officers. The leaking of information on leave of senior members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And today, the commanding officer being sent on leave 2 days after was asked to come back and take up leadership of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment. Last night, the Chief of Defense Staff sent on leave. It speaks volumes, and it shows that Trinidad and Tobago is in a very troubled position. The state of national security is in a very troubled place. And when you look at the quality of leadership coming from the government, you see a dark void that will not bring any soothing relief to this country. May God bless this country. May God bless Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you. I will ask Senator Faris Al-Rawi to come and offer some of his perspectives on some of the other developments that are taking place in this country.
Good morning, everyone. I've come to the podium next to follow on the track that has just been started. You were just given critical information for consumption, analysis, and journalistic input on national security. On that line, I've come to connect 3 issues for the population. 1, the controlled operations undercover law, which was brought into effect into the parliamentary sense by the act most recently done, the FATF Compliance Bill. 2, the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau. And 3, the SSA. National security and the management of crime and criminality are the cornerstone concerns of Trinidad and Tobago, amongst other things. But I noticed from the lack of reporting in relation to the FATF Compliance Bill as to one aspect that it was incumbent upon the opposition to raise a few issues for consideration and to ask a few questions and to point out a few things. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that you're aware that we just did a FATF Compliance Bill. Most people thought that it was just generally a bunch of laws being amended to treat with an international compliance factor. That is true in large part because we have a 5th round mutual evaluation set for March of next year. And if we fail that 5th round mutual evaluation, the risk of Trinidad being negatively listed, grey listed, some people call it blacklisted, means that our banking sector transfers and positions will become extremely difficult. Our insurance will rise because our reinsurers are foreign, etc. So you're looking on top of a forex issue, a shrinking economy issue, a negative outlook for Trinidad and Tobago issue. You're looking at a serious compliance standard that has to be met. And if we do not pass it, we're in deep trouble. Inside of that law, the FATF Compliance Bill was 120 pages long. In that 120 pages, the Police Service Act was amended, the Anti-Terrorism Act was amended, the Financial Intelligence Unit Act of Trinidad and Tobago was amended, and the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act was amended. specifically for the first time outside of the Firearms Act, we introduced something called undercover operations. For the first time, in the Firearms Act, there's a provision that allows for undercover operatives to go to work to allow a transshipment of firearms, and for the DPP to have a role in deciding whether those undercover agents will be prosecuted or not for breaches of the law. In other words, then, you put undercover people to commit crimes, to provide evidence in a court of law. You see it in the movies all the time. They rip open your shirt in a movie, the guy's wearing a wire, you see them making maneuvers to go to a judge to get a warrant. We see it in cinema, we see it in theater, correct? Well, for the first time in our country, the Police Service, the FIU, the Anti-Terrorism Act, and the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act have introduced undercover operations. That's not a thing that the government is to be blamed for. In fact, when I sat as Attorney General, I incepted the development of undercover operations laws in something called controlled operations. I instructed the Law Reform Commission to produce a paper, and we drafted a law. And in that law, we proposed that crime was to be managed by evidence, because everybody knows that you can't convict someone without evidence, and it must be in a court of law. So very often you see where people will be arrested, but it doesn't quite follow into a conviction because witnesses disappear, etc., etc. So the PNM government developed a specific law called the Controlled Operations Law. The recent position, as we left it, was that if you're going to do an undercover operation, you had to go to a judge of the High Court and get a warrant, a judicial permission to go undercover. Specifically, if you met very stringent standards, which could be revoked if you broke the law, if you met very stringent standards, you'd get this warrant. And if you met the stringent standards, we treated with how the evidence would go to court. And we said, in those circumstances, with the warrant, you may have immunity from crimes against you or civil proceedings. We produced in the law reform paper examples in New Zealand, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, even in the Caribbean. But in this FATF compliance bill, we saw criminal and civil immunity given without question. No judicial warrants. No room for the DPP to decide whether you've committed a crime or not. Blanket immunity. Statutory blanket immunity. That is something that has not featured in any newspaper report, in any analysis. I raised these arguments in the Senate myself. I'm very warmed, and I want to be fair, that the Attorney General openly recognized the merit of what I was saying. I circulated to the independent senators, the government senators, and our senators, the law reform paper, the draft law that we prepared with all its complexities of how it should be managed, as well as the cabinet note that the PNM government approved for that. And the Attorney General, in fairness to him, said that he would look at it, he recognized certain things were proper in those things, and that there were some things that were in the way of that happening right now. But ladies and gentlemen, let's draw an example. Could you imagine in our prison system where criminality exists? Because right now the maximum security prison is no longer secure, because people who have had difficulties in causing problems in the prisons have been moved to Tetron and to other places. We're in a state of emergency, and there are allegations that could easily, hypothetically, and sometimes in reality arise, that police officers may be engaged in criminal activities which are being now potentially masked as undercover operations. So are we just blanket approval, judicial scrutinies out, no warrant for these things? You just automatically give a law that says you have immunity. There is no other law of comparison in our country where you get absolute immunity for undercover operations. In a state of emergency, that becomes a very dangerous prospect. In areas of corruption in our prisons, police, and other services, that becomes a very dangerous prospect. But let's connect the dots to two other issues. I note that the Commissioner of Police is reported in the papers, as in the Newsday, for example, in an article entitled COP has faith, trust in ACIB despite move to the Office of the Attorney General. Police Commissioner Alistair Guevara says he does not believe the relocation of the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau to the Office of the Attorney General 6 years after it was moved to prevent possible political interference will affect the hunt for corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, it may be that we don't have all the facts on this. In 2019, I took a cabinet note as Attorney General to the PNM government. And in that cabinet note, I presented, and it was approved, the rationale as to why the ACIB should be moved from under my management to the police exclusively. The reason was that any appearance of political interference must not feature in police investigations, even if it involved our own government and our own ministers. And our cabinet position, which came forward and which was approved, was very critical in managing our structures. I want to read for you part of that cabinet decision and where we have need for clarification, because let's not run away and say that it was actually moved. Here is an open call for particulars. Now, when we asked for the cabinet to move it, we referred to when it was first created. In 2002, the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau was created. It was an establishment with immediate effect of a corruption investigation bureau in the Ministry of the AG to deal in an holistic manner with questions of corruption, particularly in public section. That bureau was to incorporate the functions of the anti-corruption squad of the Ministry of National Security, etc. It was charged with the responsibility for investigating Piarco Airport Development Project, Incogen and desalination plants. The Corruption Investigation Bureau was to coordinate and conduct in infractions of established procurement procedures, corrupt practices. They're to report to the Commissioner of Police and the DPP. The Bureau is to be provided with all resources to carry out its mandate, special expertise, legal advice staff. But here's the last bit, paragraph E, that the Bureau keep the Attorney General informed of the findings of its investigations. Our cabinet specifically rescinded paragraph E. We moved the reporting requirements to keep the Attorney General informed of police matters from the ACIB. Specifically, we noted in that note that, and I'll read it for you, Cabinet is advised that the proposed CIB, later called the ACIB, remains to date under the official portfolio of the AG. This is evidenced by Trinidad and Tobago Gazette, dated September 23, 2017, wherein the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs has responsibility for the administration and business of the ACIB. So we recognize that we had gazetted what was in existence, which is the ACIB, which had to report to the Attorney General under paragraph E. And we then said at our consultations with the police and other positions, and with our work to deal with prosecutions of crimes, that we recommended to the Commissioner of Police that the ACIB be placed under the exclusive authority of the Commissioner of Police, to be managed alongside other specialist divisions of the TTPS, which have responsibility for investigating and prosecuting corruption, anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, proliferation financing. Following upon the aforementioned, the Commissioner of Police publicly announced his intention to cause the establishment of a specialist division to be known as the FID, the Financial Investigation Division, comprising Fraud Squad, Financial Investigation Branch, Cybercrime Unit, and the ACIB. And listen to these words. The Attorney General supports and recommends this initiative as apposite, meaning in line, to the best interests of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs is of the firm opinion that the office of the Attorney General should be removed from any form of active, should be removed from any form of active report by and or information from the ACIB and or even the perception of same as it relates to the findings of any of its investigations. It is for this reason, as stated at paragraph 5 here and above, that the Office of the Attorney General has confined itself under the present government to providing only administrative services, including information technology services, facilities management, and rental of office space to the ACIB. We then recited the Constitution, which gives the police particular powers, and we said, remove paragraph E. That's where you report to the AG and keep him informed. And we said this, the ACIB be placed under the exclusive authority of the Commissioner of Police to be established by him pursuant to Regulation 35.4 of the Police Service Regulations 2007, and such part of the administrative and operational unit in the service as may be approved by the Minister of National Security. So my question to the government is the gazetting of the ACIB to the Attorney General only for administrative purposes? Or is it, as I can only interpret the Commissioner of Police's statements, to be understood that paragraph E has been brought back to life? It is critical, in our respectful view, that there must be no change of the cabinet decision that the police, the ACIB, should never report criminal matters of the ACIB to an Attorney General. And therefore, I leave that on the table for clarification by the government as to whether it is merely administrative support and whether they have in fact done the continuation of what was started. It's a critical point because bear in mind, I've just pointed out control operations. You have an example of a government minister being arrested last night. Is there to be prior warning of factors, etc.? We don't know, but we must keep our eyes on the general policy positions. The third point now is the SSA. Most people missed it. Nobody in the media reported that the gazetted responsibilities of the SSA, which normally reside to the Minister of National Security, have in fact gone to a division. The Minister of National Security under the Strategic Services Agency Act says that the minister means the minister to whom responsibility for national security is assigned. That is the law. The gazetting done by the Prime Minister in her major reshuffle, according to the Guardian and Express newspaper front pages, major reshuffle, saw the Minister of Homeland Security being left with two aspects, that is budget and administration, but the Attorney General has intelligence and strategy. What does that mean in the context of the law, where the law says the minister is the minister to whom the responsibility for national security exists. Is that a breach of the law? Now, even though the SSA is one of the key features in the Interception of Communication Act. So we have a law called the Interception of Communication Act, which allows the state to breach the law, because it says interception of communications is a breach of the law. But you can breach the law, you can intercept people's communications under the Interception of Communications Act if you get a warrant. Or in emergency situations, if you do it and you get a warrant after. There are two circumstances, Section 8 and Section 11 of the Interception of Communication Act. And you have to go to a judge, and you cannot use the evidence unless there's a judicial warrant. Section 8, Section 11. It provides for emergency circumstances. That's what we were suggesting for control operations, by the way. You get a warrant to participate in a crime. Interception of communication is a crime unless you have a warrant. Under the Interception of Communications Act, it is the Chief of Defense, the head of the Army or military services, Coast Guard, etc., the CDS can intercept communications. Well, you heard the story with the CDS. He gone home. It is the Commissioner of Police as two of the figures in the SSA Act. And therefore, it is critical for us to understand this move of the SSA. This all relates to national security. This has to deal with the criminal justice system. But none of this has featured, obviously, fairly, because there have been so many other issues occupying attention. You've had tons of CEOs being sacked, forced to resign, non-disclosure agreements, massive state sackings, firings by the tens of thousands, and a budget that has been inexplicably delayed, which my colleague Senator Dhanpaul will deal with in a short while. The last issue that I'll touch on is the matter of the arrest of Minister David Lee. You are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Everybody has the presumption of innocence. Mr. Lee has the presumption of innocence. I note the tendency of people to say, aha, etc. I wish Mr. Lee no harm, no jeopardy. I hope his case pans out. I want to be very fair that you are innocent until proven guilty. We expect lots of allegations against people from time to time. There is weaponization of many things, right? But in relation to the leader of the opposition's commentary, there's only one narrow point that I need to raise. I noticed that the leader of the opposition says that Mr. Lee was effectively let go and that charges have been relayed. Prime Minister, forgive me. I'm so sorry. Everybody's face was confused as to what I was saying. I apologize. The Honourable Prime Minister has said plainly that Mr. Lee is to be found, that we are to note that he was found effectively in no jeopardy because he was acquitted. And she's noted that the charges have been relayed. I'd just like to explain that under the preliminary inquiries route, this is the old law, not the Administration of Justice. Administration of Justice, we call it a JIPA, not the new law that we passed. Under the old PI Act, the Preliminary Inquiries Act, the Indictable Offences Preliminary Inquiries Act, Section 25 of that Act, beginning at subsection 5, 6, and 7, sets out that where the DPP believes a magistrate got something wrong, the DPP can request the documentation from the magistrate. The DPP can approach the High Court. The High Court, if it considers it appropriate, can decide that there is material to reverse the magistrate's decision. So there's no relaying of charges. the old matter comes alive. It's very important to say this because the administration of justice at JIPA, new law, does not allow for relaying of charges if you read it in a particular way. But the old Preliminary Inquiries Act, where a matter began and still continues, has a different approach. So we must be careful to understand that there is a nuance in the law. In the old PI legislation, section 25, 5 and 6 in particular, which tells us that there's a different way of treating with this. So those are the submissions that I ask you to bear in mind. In summary, there is a dangerous law in effect. That is civil and criminal immunity under the FIU Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act, the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, and the Police Service Act, which gives complete civil and criminal immunity. We had recommended that that must only be done under strict circumstances with a judge saying that you can go and do that, so that it still allows the constitutional office of the DPP to act. 2, there is deep concern in relation to the need for clarification about the ACIB. The ACIB was removed from reporting to the Attorney General's office by our government in 2019 because there must be no perception of the political appointee of an Attorney General having access to criminal information, criminal matters, and prosecution. So the call is to the government to clarify whether it is just merely administrative support because they haven't fixed it yet in the budget to come. So eyes will be on it in the budget. And the last matter is the division of the SSA in the face of the SSA Act. The SSA Act says that the minister is the minister to whom responsibility for national security is assigned. And therefore, there are questions to be asked inside of that as to whether it is lawful, can you bifurcate the responsibilities, etc., without having amended the law? Is there a deeper explanation? What is the problem with Minister Alexander or with Minister Sturge, both of whom have that split portfolio of national security managing the SSA? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. As usual, I like to preface all my statements by saying I have no intention of painting my country and its economy in a bad light. That's a given. First, I'd like to just say a few words on what people have been calling the budget date fiasco. Something that should not have even taken place at all. As far as I'm concerned, and from my years of experience at the Ministry of Finance, the budget date is never really an issue. What's a simple procedure? Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, call the date, and the excellent staff at the Ministry of Finance would get the budget done. Simple formula. In my time at the Ministry of Finance, at least in the last 30 years, and maybe since independence, for instance, if the budget is October the 6th, it has never been produced on October the 7th. The Ministry of Finance and the excellent staff of the Ministry of Finance will get it done. So the simple process, call the date, all the documents will be finished, the budget statement will be finished, and there will be no need for a budget date fiasco. Essentially a non-issue. But what that has caused me to think back a bit, that I've always been a strong advocate of a fixed budget date. There's no reason to not have a fixed budget date. And second point is, I've always been a strong advocate of having a fixed budget date within the fiscal year. Like for instance, I would suggest that we not go past September 30th. That's my suggestion. Everything could be completed within that fiscal year, including the debate. The budget could be assented to by Her Excellency. Everything could be finished within the fiscal year, September 30th. There's no need to take us into October and all the necessary issues that come up by taking us into October, and then people thinking about what will happen if we go past October. Unnecessary stress to all parliamentarians, unnecessary stress to the government themselves, unnecessary stress to the public servants, and unnecessary, as the Guardian called it today, an unnecessary blunder. And I just want to read a piece on the Guardian, brilliantly written, just 2 paragraphs in the editorial. The national budget is not a party showpiece. It is a country's most consequential economic statement, the annual temperature check on whether citizens can expect an ease or a squeeze. It guides investors, unions, households, and businesses alike. When that spiral is shrouded in secrecy and sloppiness, confidence in government itself erodes. Brilliantly written. That's exactly the point. There's no need to put a budget date shrouded in secrecy. There's no advantage or disadvantage to a budget date. It doesn't give the government an advantage or a disadvantage unless you have an immediate measure that would need the provisional collection of taxes order. There is no advantage as far as I see it. And what you do, again, just to complete that part, you just put the population under unnecessary stress by accelerating this process during the debate, the population not knowing the full story because of this accelerated process, keeping everything within 2 weeks. Keeping everything within 2 weeks. Just to say to the national community, I'm pitching this at very much a layman's level. And I'll say this. It's not easy for a Minister of Finance or for a permanent secretary or for the staff at the Ministry of Finance. It is almost physically impossible to script the perfect budget. Someone, somewhere, is going to be upset about something. It's a complex issue. In a complex society, if for instance, just hypothetically speaking, I give every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago $1 million in the budget, someone is going to come up and say, why didn't I get 1.5 million? It's just the nature of the society that we live in. Okay? It is almost physically impossible to script the perfect budget. There are lots of competing issues because you have many stakeholders to satisfy. You have, and in this case of this government, you have a lot of populist promises to fulfill. You have sector balances for diversification to create new revenue streams according to the government. And there are certain unknowns and uncertainties, like, for instance, the timelines associated with Dragon Gas and ExxonMobil, etc. But I just want to take you a bit into, and I'm dropping it, and I'm pitching it at very layman's term, right? And some of the components of the budget. A budget is essentially made up, and I think this is something that I don't know if it has ever been explained to the national community, but I'll try. A budget is made up essentially of three major components. There's a revenue component, an expenditure component, and a financing component. Let us look at the revenue side. It's based essentially on the minister's assumptions on gas and oil prices. Secondly, what kind of fiscal measures he's aiming at, whether he's going to have revenue enhancing measures, revenue decreasing measures. But in this budget this year, the government is a bit cornered. The fact that there'll be no TTRA and the $5 billion just in revenue, potential $5 billion in revenue just went through the door. That we, in this case, he cannot or should not allocate any money for collection from property taxes. There are lots of promises in the government's manifesto. No taxation of pensions. Your parents would be happy to hear that. Reduction in corporation taxes. Reducing the VAT base. Remember the 7,000 commodities to be taken off the VAT base. Reduce the price of fuel at the pump. These are billion-dollar measures. So if you add the fact that there'll be no revenue authority and the $5 billion plus a potential loss of revenue with all these measures and all these promises of another $5 billion essentially, you're looking at a revenue projection of around, and if you base the oil price on a similar oil price as what he did during the mid-year of $66 and $5 for gas, revenue projection could be about $54 billion. Easily. And the minister himself, he knows that even before the country earns $1 in revenue, the country faces a bill. It's a monthly bill of $4.5 billion in mandatory expenditure. Can't escape that. Those are things like, and I mentioned it before, those are things like old age pension, disability grant, public assistance grant. The bill is $4.5 billion a month, which translates to $54 billion a year. So immediately, you have an expenditure bill of $54 billion and a revenue collection estimated at $54 billion. But the deficit this year, I am projecting, this is just, I could be totally wrong. I expect expenditure to be around $63 billion and the deficit to be $9 billion plus. That's just my estimate. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. My advice to the Minister of Finance is a simple piece of advice. We are now under major watch from the credit rating agencies. We just saw Standard & Poor's recently and the outlook changed to negative. Keep the deficit within 3 to 5% of our gross domestic product. You will be able to negotiate that with the International Monetary Fund. You will be able to negotiate that with the credit rating agencies. Once you go beyond 5% of GDP, you're taking the country down a very difficult slope. But that $9 billion I just suggested there, $9 billion in deficit, does not include the public service negotiations, which are earmarked to start at 10%. So it's very possible that the deficit could be significantly higher than the $9 billion I suggested, which puts us in a very difficult position internationally. Because you're going to have to face, luckily not me, the Minister of Finance is going to have to face the credit rating agencies and the International Monetary Fund with a deficit more than 5% of GDP. The international benchmark, as I said before, is somewhere between 3 and 5%. And that's something he's going to have to take major note of when in presenting the budget. Yeah, the Article 4 of the IMF, yeah. So how, and the third component is the financing. How is he going to finance this $9 billion? And this is without the back pay for the public servants, which is estimated at $9 billion. And this is without the current expenditure, the monthly expenditure, adding to the mandatory expenses of about $200 million. How is he going to finance this? Well, in a budget, there are 3 major financing components, of sometimes 4. You have the domestic borrowing, external borrowing, another external there could be multilateral borrowing, and that which is IMF, well, not that, forget IMF, World Bank, CDB, if you wish, IDB, right? And the borrowing on the domestic local capital market. Problem the minister faces immediately. He has almost maxed out the borrowing on the Domestic Loans Act. We borrow under two major acts. Almost maxed out on the Domestic Loans Act. And most domestic banks are complaining that they are overexposed to the government at this point in time. So they're not too keen on lending domestically. Second thing is almost maxed out on the External Loans Act. And it will become difficult to do a bond issue externally. So I just want to explain this term called headroom. There's a fixed amount that is legislated for the Development Loans Act and the External Loans Act. Headroom means the difference between what you already borrowed and what has been legislated, right? Not much room or headroom remains on both the domestic and external borrowing. So what is going to happen? How you solve that? Well, the Minister of Finance and the government are going to have to approach the Parliament to increase the borrowing limit on both the domestic side and the external side. Red flag. Immediate red flag to all the credit rating agencies. Because when you're increasing the borrowing limit, you're suggesting that you're going to borrow. That could lead, and I just want to let it be known, that the credit agencies, I said, I'm not painting the country in dark light. I'm just giving you the facts. What is going to happen is that the credit agencies, they don't need to visit Trinidad to downgrade. They don't need to come in with a team or anything like that and look at new data. They have all the data. The chances of being downgraded with raising that kind of financing and increasing that ceiling is highly likely. And what that means is that it makes it even more difficult and more expensive to borrow, both domestically and externally. Right? So the Minister of Finance is essentially painting himself into a corner. The next point is that they could dip into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And I just want to point out something very critical here. At the end of September 2015, the net asset value, or the size of the fund, stood at $5.6 billion US. Take note of the number. At the end of September 2015, $5.6 billion. And with all the old talk about the then administration raiding the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, at the end of August 2025, and hot off the press data, the net asset value of the fund stood at $6.3 billion. Almost $1 billion increased. But if the minister plans on accessing the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, I am sure he's aware that there are withdrawal rules. And I know something, I wasn't going to do it, but I think it is essential that the national community be aware of what happens when you try to withdraw, or what the mechanics and the rules. I think it's very critical. And I'm going to read it. It's not going to take long. A withdrawal can only be made if actual petroleum revenues for the financial year fall below the budgeted petroleum revenues by at least 10%. In other words, budgeted versus actual revenues, petroleum revenues. The withdrawal is limited to the lesser of two amounts: 60% of the amount of the shortfall in petroleum revenues, or 25% of the balance of the fund at the beginning of that financial year. It is also critical that the fund has a floor of, this floor here means, this floor is FLOOR, where you cannot take the fund to below $1 billion US. Any amount withdrawn from the HSF is deposited to the consolidated fund within 48 hours of withdrawal. And as you remember, former Minister Imbert went to Parliament and he amended the HSF Act to allow 3 new withdrawal rules. The first one was a natural disaster. So every country had faced with a natural disaster, you could withdraw from the heritage. Second one is during a pandemic-like situation. And the third one was a precipitous decline in budgeted revenues. So the minister has all those withdrawal rules to work with. It is up to him how he decides to proceed. And then I've been hearing that they plan on using PPPs as part of, let's use the word financing of the budget. But there are certain downsides to using PPPs. The first one is really and truly, what happens if the private partner defaults? Because PPP here means public-private partnership, government-private sector. What happens if the private partner defaults? The government has to take up the slack, literally. And PPPs put extreme strain on your fiscal accounts over the medium term. Those are the 2 major ones. And also, there's a major risk of overruns when you deal with PPPs. So these are concerns I'm just pointing out to the minister. Free advice, if you want to call it. And that things that he should raise some red flags for me. Now, just in wrapping up, I want to point out that 2 things that no one seems to be discussing at all. And that is the use of the overdraft at the central bank to finance the budget. In case you didn't know, fiscal policy in Trinidad and Tobago is totally stymied by the overdraft at the central bank. It is totally under the control by the overdraft at the central bank. And let me tell you when this started to happen. This started to happen in 2009 when we experienced our first fiscal deficit in decades. And it continued, that deficit continued, I think 1 year, 2022. So in 2009 to present, I think the only year we didn't have a fiscal deficit was 2022. And that has caused a build-up at the central bank in an account called the Exchequer account. And that Exchequer account has now been built up because of the fact that we're running deficits. That Exchequer account, and I'm putting this out here to everyone, that Exchequer account now stands at $50 billion. And the only way we could get out of that Exchequer account and remove fiscal policy from the clutches of the overdraft facility at the central bank is by paying off that $50 billion. And the only way you could pay off that $50 billion, the country must run fiscal surpluses. So in other words, we cannot escape that overdraft for the central bank, which, and let me tell you something, from my experience at the Ministry of Finance and my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance, they will tell you that we have had sleepless nights about that overdraft. Sleepless nights because we will come down to the wire in paying public servants if the overdraft isn't available. That has happened. And that $50 billion is going to hang over the head of any Minister of Finance. Unless you're able to run surpluses to reduce that $50 billion, there are certain accounts that you simply cannot use because with mortgage to that $50 billion, you cannot use the Green Fund. You cannot use the Infrastructure Development Fund because it will all impact the overdraft facility. Very, very, very critical to understand, and the national population must understand this. That is, the 50 million, while not included as part of our overall debt, is a debt. The next thing I saw, and came out of a document called the Economic Data Pack, September 2025, from the Central Bank. And I haven't seen this in a while. And I've been around the block for a while. As of August 2025, our net official reserves stood at 4.6 billion US. The Heritage and Stabilization Fund at 6.3. But the net official reserves stood at 4.6 billion. The equivalent of, and this is the dangerous part, the equivalent of 5.4 months of import cover. And I remember during the media review, the Minister of Finance said, at that time it was 7.5, and he said, we're in big trouble at 7.5, which is not really true, because the international benchmark is 3 months. But 5.4 is taking us there very quickly. And you know, when you start to look at decline in reserves, and you start to look at balance of payment support, there's only one agency you can call when you need balance of payment support. And we have to stop speaking about these buffers, because it gives us a false sense of security by thinking about the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, a false sense of security. But when you start, and when the government came into power, it made, let me repeat, this is Central Bank data, not Vishnu Dhanpaul, okay? Let me give you the name of the document. The Economic Data Pack, September 2025, right? In May 2025, the net official reserves stood at 5.093 billion. But for some strange reason, by August 2025, it declined drastically to $4.6 billion. So just not to be biased, let us compare the previous 5 months. All right? In November 2024, it stood at 5.463. And in March 2025, it stood at 5.272. So there's an accelerated decline from April of this year, thank you, from April of this year to August of this year. And I don't know what seems to be causing that, but apparently $600 million US difference from April of this year to August. And you can check the data if you wish at the Central Bank. And these are just some of the red flags. And again, I'm telling the national population that when you start to have balance of payment issues and you start to see a decline in your net official reserves, there's only one agency could be on your mind. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Any questions? Okay, Senator Dhanpaul will take your questions, seeing that he was the last at the podium. We will ask ask members of the media to pose your questions to Senator Dhanpaul, and then Senator Al-Rawi and myself will subject ourselves to further questions from members of the media. Senator Dhanpaul.
Thank you.
Mr. Dhanpaul, are you saying that the economic situation is such that you appear to be heading to the IMF?
I didn't say that. I said that when you see that drastic level of decline in your reserves, okay, and you're seeking balance of payment support, there's only one agency you can call.
Which agency is that?
There's only one. There's one at the International Monetary Fund, because they provide balance of payment support
To the Central Bank.
to the Central Bank.
What are your expectations from the budget? What do you expect? Given all the picture that you have painted there, what are your expectations?
I'll tell you my expectation. Unfortunately, as I told my colleagues, I'm not a full politician yet, so I'll tell you my expectation as a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance. I wish the Minister of Finance well. If he does well, the country does well. And I want my country to do well. Those are my expectations.
That is not an expectation, that's a hope.
What can I say? But unfortunately, he has a lot of constraints. But I still wish him well, and as I said, if he does well, the country does well, and I really wish that he can make the. I know for a fact he has great help at the Ministry of Finance, excellent staff. So I know they're not going to lead them on the wrong path.
There are so many instances of the government not being able to pay its bills at this stage whatsoever.
As I pointed out, remember the government is faced with a bill of $4.5 billion every month without a dollar being earned. Mandatory expenditure. And that's the issue. Because during that cash flow period, he has to deal with the overdraft of the central bank, which is a major burden. And to get out of that overdraft, as I said, you need to record fiscal surpluses.
But I wanted to clear that overdraft is 50 billion?
That overdraft, no, the exchequer account is 50 billion. It's 50 billion. And the only way that could be reduced is that you have to keep repaying it into the central bank by running fiscal surpluses. Once you keep running fiscal deficits, that 50 billion starts to accumulate more. Yeah. That I'll give you an in 2009, when the first deficit we had in decades, you remember that? And it continued until 2022. That build-up, it started at about, the exchequer account started a build-up of about 5 billion, right? To now, 50 billion over the years. Yeah. So,
one of the recommendations of the opposition to remedy the situation, given that the government has already decided to do away with the proposed revenue measures.
you mean like the TRA?
Yes. What could feasibly be done at this point?
Well, let me tell you. I noticed the government had a change of heart on the Dragon gas. And I hope that they could have a change of heart on the TTRA. For the sake of the country. This is not about politics any longer. You are now taking the country away from earning a potential $5 billion a year. Where you say you're going to make it up with new revenue streams. But those new revenue streams don't happen overnight. Okay? All you have to do is just enhance the use of the TTRA. And I'm waiting, and I promised the Minister of Finance that I'm going to judge him on my baseline scenario of 2025 to see how much money he could raise with his new policy at the BIR as against the $5 billion from the TTRA. Let us see if he can match it.
When you mentioned the 600 million US withdrawn, that was from the HSF.
No, that was a decline in reserves from April this year to August.
You're calling on the government to explain what went wrong with that.
I wouldn't mind an explanation. But it's right there in the economic data pack. You could fact check me. It's right on the central bank's website.
Was them to
Yes, I need an explanation. Of course we need an explanation.
You can give me that full sentence, like, hold on.
11 boys do that. But you understand my point. The country needs to know, not necessarily Vishnu, Dhanpaul, the country needs to know whether the 600 million in reserves disappear since they came in office. US, 600 million US. You can check it in the data pack itself.
Right.
when you mentioned the ceiling to the borrowings, right? Could you give us a sense of what exactly is the ceiling and what percentage of that we have utilized?
Oh, good question. The ceiling on the if I remember properly, and remember I've been out it for a while, the ceiling on the Domestic Loans Act is about $75 billion, and we have taken up about 90% of that already. Yeah, that's what it is. About 8 billion, and the external, probably about 500 million US left.
500 million
US, yeah.
And the 8 billion is US?
No, that's CT. That's CT. Domestic TT.
And then you take 4.5 billion a month into 8.
And there's things like the property tax of $150 million a year. $150 million can't run this country for half an hour.
But people still have to pay the property tax, so you can't sell.
Yeah, the act has not been repealed, huh?
So you can't sell a property, get a mortgage title unless you pay.
Correct.
What is the opposition's advice to the national population in terms of how to operate moving forward?
Auto operator. Sorry?
Moving forward.
Oh, how to
Their lives.
All right, I'll tell you this, huh? The country had patience and I had patience, and we had patience in the opposition with the government as far as the economy is concerned, because let us be real, it wasn't their budget they were using, right? It wasn't their budget. They were using let's just call it the remnants of the last administration's budget. However, this is their budget. The population needs to monitor their budget and the use of their budget now. No excuses, no blame Keith, no blame PNM, right? This is their budget. Okay? And I remember the Minister of Finance saying in the media review that one of the reasons why there was a media review because the previous administration underestimated everything. So there's need for media review. So given the fact that the Minister of Finance is apparently good at estimation, there will be no media review. I'm not looking forward to a media review next year because he should be excellent at estimation. Because he said we had a media review because of underestimation of both expenditure, revenue, everything. So we'll see in April next year what will transpire. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Dhanpaul, for a very comprehensive presentation this afternoon. Members of the media, you have Senator Al-Rawi and myself. Any questions?
Yes, Senator Al-Rawi. When you mentioned the blanket immunity that is now in the law, is it that this government removed the prescription for the warrant? And why would you say that would be the case, that they would do that?
So the only law that existed prior to the FATF compliance law that provided controlled operations. What is a controlled operation? Let's get to that first, perhaps. So in the Firearms Act, there's a section in the Firearms Act that says you can go through with allowing a transshipment of firearms in a criminal enterprise. The state officers can be involved in that, and that will be controlled. That'll be called a controlled delivery. That's the name of the law, a controlled delivery. It does not state that you're immune from criminal prosecution or civil prosecution. When we were the government, I developed a law which I fashioned in my mind off of the Interception of Communication Act. I said, look, what's the problem with Trinidad and Tobago and crime? We can't convict nobody because we have no evidence, because nobody willing to say that man committed the crime, because you have witness intimidation, killings, etc. So we came up with the idea to research the law, use the Interception of Communications model as an example, where you get a warrant to say, listen, I want to go undercover. We found umpteen examples of the law, which the Law Revision Commission came up with. The same Mr. Samraj Haripal, SC, who just received a national award, he wrote a paper on controlled deliveries, but we broadened it to something called controlled operations. We developed a law, a draft law, which our cabinet approved, saying, listen, let's allow human intelligence. Let's plug undercover officers into the criminal matrix and let us have them, for this criminal undercover operation, go by a judge and get a warrant to do that. So that you couldn't just be making it up as you go in. You had supervision. Because, of course, if you entrap somebody, it throws out the case. If you abuse the law, it could throw out the case. But if you're also a corrupt officer, you might be masquerading as an undercover agent. There must be a balance. So we came up with this huge law. We did a cabinet note. We brought forward the consultation that we did with the police and everybody else, etc. And we had a law reform paper. So we came up with that law. In the FATF compliance bill, they brought out only control operations undercover. You get in civil and criminal immunity, full stop. No judicial warrant, no balance. So what I'm pointing out is that that is a very dangerous formula, because you have lots of circumstances. Now, in fairness to the Attorney General, he recognized what I was saying, because I circulated all of this to the Senate, right, in writing, and he said it's something that they would look at, but he suggested that there were reasons why they couldn't do it now. I'm pointing out, in light of the SSA, which has been split between the Homeland Security and the Attorney General, the Act does not say that there are two ministers. The Act says it is the minister to whom responsibility for national security is assigned. And if you look at the CDS, under the Interception of Communications Act, only 3 people could intercept your communication by authority: the Commissioner of Police, the SSA head, and the Chief of Defense Staff. So one gets sent home last night. The other one is now reporting to 2 ministers in what appears to be a breach of the law. And you have a Commissioner of Police who fortunately has passed through a service commission and other positions. These are things which much greater inquiry is required, particularly when the ACIB has some questions. Because if the Attorney General has the ACIB merely to pay for their rental and accommodation and supply IT, that's fine. And until the budget has come about, it may be therefore perfectly fine for the Attorney General to have had the gazetted responsibility for that. But if it is that they have removed the restriction that we put in, which said do not involve any Attorney General in criminal intelligence or knowledge of criminal matters, then that's a problem. So these are very simple statements, but they have deep ramifications, particularly when you note that maximum security prison has no longer maintained itself as a maximum security prison. New maximum security prison is in Tetron, because all the dangerous criminals in maximum security have gone there. So you have a criminal enterprise in the prison systems. But it is highly unusual for a Minister of National Security, which one now we don't know, Minister Sturge or Minister Alexander, to be removed from the portfolio of the SSA. I've never seen that before. There may be a perfectly good reason for it, but it was buried in the Gazette and in fact in the erratum. So our obligation as an opposition is to point out things which we think affect our democracy, rule of law, etc. Not to ascribe open blame immediately. We must, you may have noticed, we take a very fair position on issues. We take a lot of condemnation from people that want us to be bloodthirsty and making allegations about people. We will not do that. There may be very well a good reason that the Attorney General's ACIB erratum came up. There must be an explanation on the SSA, because these things matter. Okay? We're assisting the Fourth Estate. We're asking the media to look at these issues. Okay? Is there anything else? Yes.
I don't want you to answer the question.
Thank you, Senator Al-Rawi.
I just wanted to do something to clear up something. I noticed the PNM has been kind of polite in its comments on David Lee.
Polite.
Yeah, polite in the sense that I don't think the PNM came out openly and said he should be removed.
Uh-huh.
The PNM asked the question whether he still functioned it. Oh, sorry. Yes,
So can you repeat the question? I realize that I passed the microphone to you, so I think the audience listening should hear the full extent of the question that you're posing.
Well, the PNM, as I said, was a bit polite or diplomatic or whatever you want to call it. In that it didn't come out openly and say David Lee should be removed from office while this matter is being cleared up or investigated or whatever, going through the courts. It instead said it wants the Prime Minister to say whether he still continues to serve as a minister, which to me, obviously he's still there. There's been no statement saying that his appointment has been revoked. So what I want to get from you, a clear, conclusively clear statement on what the PNM feels should be done about David if the Prime Minister removed him.
We have precedent in this country where ministers of government faced criminal charges whilst they sat in the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. We have precedent in the Westminster tradition, the Westminster format of democracy as to ministers facing criminal charges. When the PNM served in government some years ago, 2 ministers of government were charged with criminal offenses. I think it was Eric Franklin Khan and Eric Williams. Mr. Patrick Manning, then Prime Minister, took the decision that the both ministers served at his pleasure, being Prime Minister. And therefore, in order to protect the institution and the office that they held, decided not pronouncing on their guilt or innocence, and of course recognizing the fact that an allegation of criminal conduct is an allegation. And as Senator Al-Rawi said, everyone enjoys the privilege to be presumed to be innocent until proven guilty by a court. But coming to the point that you serve within a cabinet, within a ministerial portfolio, as Patrick Manning did, he removed the both officers from serving in the cabinet. That's just one example. During the first term of Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar, Kamla 1.0, similar circumstances and similar allegations came up with respect to serving members of her cabinet. And you can go back to press reports where the Prime Minister said, in removing Jack Warner when he faced serious allegations of crime and money laundering and corruption in FIFA, she called upon him to clear his name. And she removed him from the cabinet. I think he was serving as Minister of National Security at the time. When her Attorney General faced serious criminal allegations with respect to witness tampering, she removed him from office. I think when Gary Griffith was Minister of National Security, I can't recall if there was any allegation of crime, but he was a witness. And based on what transpired between the serving Minister of National Security and the then Attorney General Alan Ram Logan, she removed both of them from her cabinet. Marlene MacDonald served as a minister under the leadership of former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. Faced criminal charges and investigation, and the tradition was that she was relieved of her ministerial portfolio immediately and given the opportunity to have her matter cleared before the courts. I checked back on social media the news cycle a couple years ago, I think it was 2022, where the UNC made allegations against Government Minister Foster Cummings. Allegations, not charges, allegations. And the Prime Minister and some of her, well, she was leader of the opposition then, leader of the UNC, and some of her colleagues in the opposition, call upon Dr. Keith Rowley as Prime Minister to remove Foster Cummings from the cabinet in the government of Trinidad and Tobago simply because of allegations concerning land and all of these things. Not that he faced criminal charges, but allegations that came from certain quarters, and the leader of the opposition, now Prime Minister, called upon the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, to remove Senator Cummings and Minister Cummings from office on the basis of allegations. Today, what is facing the Prime Minister is not allegations or investigations, but criminal charges being brought upon a sitting member of her cabinet. And we must reinforce the point that Minister David Lee is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But in accordance with our traditions over the years, seeing that those charges have been relayed in the courts in order to protect the office of minister, the serious public responsibility of the office of minister, and to protect the integrity of the cabinet and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, David Lee serves at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, and therefore it falls upon the Prime Minister to do the right and honorable thing in the public's interest to remove David Lee from the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago until such time he ventilates his matter before a court of law. It is the responsibility of the Prime Minister. And I see some analysts saying that David Lee, it falls upon him to decide what to do. And I say that they are hypocrites to say that. They are misleaders. They are national misleaders, because one can imagine if it was a PNM minister, if it was a PNM minister facing criminal charges, those same analysts would say that the Prime Minister should immediately remove him from the cabinet and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Today, Kamla Persad Bissessa, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, has no wiggle room on this matter. She should protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And David Lee, an esteemed member of the House of Representatives, will continue to serve in the House of Representatives as a minister, as a MP, until such time that matter is ventilated. But the Prime Minister has a duty to protect public office. She has a duty to protect the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and she has no room where this is concerned, and she has to do the honorable thing.
And you think that failing to taking action that David Lee himself has any obligation at all?
He has precedent to follow, and he should do it not because there is any guilt or pronouncement of guilt or innocence, but sometimes as office holders, we just have to do the honorable thing. Just do the honorable thing. Because the office that we hold, they are not personal to us. They are office of the people, and they must be occupied by honorable people. It has nothing to do with his guilt or innocence, and we believe in the independence of the judiciary. We believe in our legal systems. We believe in the right to be presumed to be innocent until otherwise proven guilty. But this has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you should sit in a cabinet. You are facing serious criminal charges. And we have to be mature enough to take decisions that sometimes personally we may not feel comfortable, and the Prime Minister has a duty to act in the public's interest.
Do you think the Prime Minister has dealt with infractions in the cabinet appropriately? We had another minister who engaging in a tit for tat with Delcy Rodriguez.
Oh, the nuke minister?
Pardon me?
The nuke minister?
Yes.
The nuke junior minister?
Yes. Well, yes, he has.
Say that India should nuke Venezuela? Well, the Prime Minister separated herself and her government from the irresponsible statement of her junior minister. I sometimes ask myself whether or not the Prime Minister has the capacity to rein in some of these people, and whether she can take the action that is needed to rein in some of these people that she decided to put in her cabinet. And it is her decision to keep him. And the people of Trinidad and Tobago must question the judgment of any leader, also a prime minister, to take someone like this gentleman and give him ministerial portfolio. It says a lot about her and her discretion.
Because she did say at the very inception of the creation of the cabinet that people should
Stay in their lane.
stay in their lane, and there's been a constant.
It is her duty. You understand? These ministers, they have nothing to do in their ministry. They are taking taxpayers' money every month, and all they are doing is blogging. They are paid bloggers. $40,000. These ministers, these junior ministers, getting $40,000 a month. The taxpayers, you're firing CPEP workers. Many of them can't send the children to school. You're firing reforestation workers. You're firing people in the state sector who are well qualified in the jobs to come forward and serve. Over 50, 60,000 people on the breadline can't send their children to school. You walk in your constituency here in the cries, but you have ministers of government drawing $40,000 a month, and all they can do is blog and behave in the most dishonorable way, disrespecting members of the society, behaving very repugnant, and they are shame on the people of this country. But they are serving at the pleasure of Kamla Persad Bissessa. Always remember that. They are serving at the pleasure of Kamla Persad Bissessa. So when they speak, they represent her.
And on that note, if she were to remove David Lee, it's either the two of them would have to step up.
I will not go so far to say that if David Lee's appointment is revoked, that the Prime Minister has to elevate the two bloggers to the office of senior minister. And that is entirely up to the Prime Minister. But we are saying that we have serious matters facing the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister must be called upon to do the honourable thing and protect the public's interests, protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, protect ministerial office holders, protect ministers' offices. They are representative of the people. It has nothing to do with how you feel personally about these people. It has nothing to do with your political affiliation and how you feel about them, and whether you can continue to support them privately. I mean, we are all human beings, and I can just imagine the pain and the trauma that David Lee is facing and his family. I can just imagine. I don't wish that on any human being. I don't wish that on any office holder. It is a very difficult place for any office holder to find themselves. But when you decide to serve in public office, you must do the honourable thing, and the Prime Minister has no wiggle room in this matter. She has to do the honourable thing and protect these institutions and protect the office. Thank you. ladies and gentlemen, and we always look forward to your support and your cooperation.